Part 1, The Invitation. Segment 1, The Letter and the Descent. The sound of the rain against the cracked window had long since become part of Ethan Caldwell's breathing. It filled the silence between thoughts, between the words he didn't speak. His Manchester flat was a box of dim light and stale air, half lived in, half forgotten. Unpaid bills littered the counter beside a bowl of untouched cereal. The television whispered static that no longer frightened him. Smokey, his gray cat, perched on the sill, watching the reflections of raindrops slide down the glass like small worlds collapsing. The hum of the refrigerator was the only steady heartbeat in the room. Ethan rubbed his temples. The pain behind his eyes was constant these days, a pressure that pulsed in rhythm with the weather. The kind that came not from lack of sleep, but from the kind of guilt that refused to fade. Every time he blinked, he saw the road, the headlights, his brother's hand slipping out of reach. He reached for the unopened envelope that had arrived that morning. No sender, just the black sigil embossed on the front, a circle intersected by an hourglass shape. Oblivion Trust. He had thought it was another debt collector until he felt the weight inside. Thicker paper, embossed lettering, the kind of quality that didn't belong in his life anymore. He tore it open with a kitchen knife. Mr. Ethan Caldwell, we are aware of your current circumstances and the financial obligations pressing upon you. Oblivion Trust extends a formal offer of employment at our Yorkshire division. Position, custodial operations night shift. Compensation, £800 nightly, cash upon completion of each shift. Transportation and lodging provided. Report to entrance gate B, Wensleydale sector 9:00 p.m. Do not inquire beyond your clearance level. Oblivion Trust Human Assets Division. Ethan stared at the letter for a long time. The words cash upon completion hit him harder than any warning could. £800 for a single night. Even if it was some industrial cleaning job, a few nights could buy him weeks of peace. Maybe even get the landlord off his back. But there was something else, something in the language or the seal that stirred something deeper, a sense of inevitability, as if the letter had found him, not the other way around. Smokey jumped down, brushed against his leg, and meowed once, a sound halfway between concern and impatience. Ethan smiled weakly. "Don't look at me like that, mate," he said. "It's just a job." But even as he said it, he felt the lie settle in the room like fog. The train to Yorkshire was nearly empty. By the time it passed the last visible station, the windows reflected nothing but his own face and the dark countryside beyond. The conductor never checked his ticket. When Ethan looked up again, even the lights in the car flickered with uneven pulses, as if reacting to his heartbeat. He dozed once. In that moment between sleep and waking, he dreamt of the letter burning, black ink twisting into the shape of an eye. When he woke, the carriage was silent and cold, the windows opaque with condensation. The train stopped in the middle of nowhere. A man in a black uniform stood outside the carriage door, waiting. His face was half hidden under the hood of a raincoat. No greeting, no introduction, just a gloved hand gesturing for Ethan to follow. They walked along a narrow, unlit path. The only sound was the wind threading through distant trees and the soft scrape of Ethan's boots against wet gravel. Smokey was tucked quietly in his carrier, eyes wide and alert. After 15 minutes, they reached a metal structure protruding from the ground like an exposed bone. No signage, no lights, just a heavy steel hatch embedded in concrete. The man entered a code, and with a hydraulic hiss, the door split open. Warm, sterile air rushed out. Ethan's stomach tightened. Inside, fluorescent lights stretched into endless tunnels of gray. The architecture had no aesthetic, no signature, just functionality stripped of humanity. Concrete, steel, and silence. They passed empty offices with frosted glass walls, motionless vending machines, and long corridors that seemed to bend without logic. Every turn looked identical. Every echo seemed delayed, as though the sound itself had to find its way back. Finally, the man stopped before a steel door marked Custodial Wing, B1. Uniform inside. Locker 13. Instructions will be provided, the man said, his voice low and mechanical. Then, without another word, he turned and left. Ethan stared after him until the footsteps disappeared. He exhaled slowly. Yeah, this isn't weird at all, he muttered. Inside the locker room, a row of gray jumpsuits hung like suspended bodies. Locker 13 creaked when he opened it. Inside were a folded uniform, a small metal key, a laminated card engraved, not printed, with 6 sentences. Each line was etched into the surface in perfect mechanical precision, as though the steel itself had been scarred to hold the words. The 6 rules, Oblivion Protocol division. Feed teddy blood once per night, fresh source only. Greet Madame Sever if you hear her, never ignore. If you see reverse Jack, move opposite to your reflection. Maintain eye contact with phantom model until it freezes. Keep the rain child wet, she must never dry. Feed the shadow speaker, never starve the guilt. Beneath the list was a small note, barely legible. Each action sustains containment. Failure invites recurrence. Ethan's throat went dry. He turned the card over, expecting a company logo, maybe a warning. Instead, the back was perfectly smooth, polished like a mirror. He caught his reflection distorted across the metal, eyes hollowed by fatigue and something close to dread. Smokey meowed from his carrier, breaking the silence. Ethan crouched, ran a hand along the bars. Guess we're sticking it out, huh? He whispered. Just one night. He slipped into the uniform. The fabric was stiff, synthetic. On the left sleeve, the insignia of Oblivion Trust, the hourglass inside a circle, stitched in black thread. He clipped his ID badge, took the key, and pocketed the metal card. Then he followed the corridor deeper into the complex. The main hall of the underground facility resembled a cathedral drained of faith. Pillars rose from polished concrete, reaching toward unseen ceilings. The air was warmer here, almost too warm, carrying a metallic tang that coated his tongue. Lights flickered in rhythmic patterns, 3 short blinks, one long, like Morse code with no translation. At the far end stood a figure beside an industrial door. A woman in a white coat, her posture immaculate, her expression almost carved. When Ethan approached, she didn't look up from her clipboard. Ethan Caldwell, she said. Her tone was clinical. Assigned to Sector 3 maintenance. You will operate between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. You'll receive payment at completion. He hesitated. Look, I'm not sure what exactly I'm maintaining. Follow the rules, she interrupted. Everything else will follow you. He blinked. I'm sorry, what? She finally looked at him. Her eyes were completely black. No sclera, no iris, just reflective darkness. And then she smiled. The lights flickered again, and she was gone. Only the echo of her voice lingered. Follow the rules. At 9:01 p.m., Ethan swiped his keycard through the panel beside Sector 3. The door clicked. The lights beyond hummed alive. Rows of equipment lined the hall, cages, glass tanks, surgical tables covered in sheets. He couldn't tell if the stains were rust or something else. In the far corner, a massive shape loomed behind reinforced glass. A child's toy, maybe a bear, but grotesquely large, its surface stitched from leather and fur. Its button eyes reflected the hallway lights like a predator's gaze. Beside it, a small chute marked nutrient entry, Rule 1. He glanced at his card. Feed teddy blood once per night, fresh source only. Something deep in the bear's chest moved. The motion was slow, deliberate. The sound, a wet inhale. Smokey hissed in his carrier. Ethan's hand trembled as he reached for the small crate labeled supply. He peeled back the lid and froze. Inside were sealed pouches, each marked human grade. He stood there for a long time, the hum of fluorescent lights pressing against his skull. His own reflection stared back from the glass, wide-eyed, uncertain, alive. Behind that reflection, in the faint shimmer of the glass, the bear blinked. And smiled. Segment 2, first shift. The rules begin. The sound came first, a low, steady hum from somewhere deep within the walls. Ethan stood in the narrow corridor, the pouches of blood sweating against his palm. Behind the reinforced glass, the giant bear remained motionless, head tilted, watching. Its eyes were buttons, yes, but beneath them something moved. Slow, pulsing veins that shouldn't exist in cloth. He swallowed. "Feed Teddy blood once per night," he murmured, rereading the rule. "Fresh source only." He slid one of the pouches into the metal chute. The bear's stitched mouth twitched. A sound like suction filled the chamber. The red drained from the bag in seconds, leaving it pale and empty. The hum in the walls ceased. Ethan stepped back. "Good job," he whispered. Smokey meowed softly from his carrier, a thread of sound that cut the silence like a warning. The rest of Sector 3 was dim and silent, the fluorescent lights humming out of sync. Most doors were sealed with hazard tape. A few bore names that made no sense. The Phantom Room, Subject RJ. At the end of the hall stood a steel door with a narrow window. Through it, he saw only a staircase descending into red light. A small plaque read, Sector 3B, Lower Halls. Underneath, someone had carved into the metal. We tried to leave. Ethan ran his thumb along the edge of the plaque, then turned back to the rule card. Rule 2, greet Madame Sever if you hear her. Never ignore. He exhaled. Right, greet the bleeding ghost lady, got it. Still, he couldn't shake the sense that the rules weren't meant to protect him. They were designed to keep them content, to feed the hunger of whatever things were kept alive down here. He continued down the hall, flashlight flickering across peeling paint and black mold. Somewhere distant, a soft tapping began, rhythmic, like fingernails on metal. Tap, tap, tap. Then a faint voice, feminine whispering. "Ethan." He froze. Ethan Caldwell. The voice came from behind the wall, close enough to feel warm against his ear. He turned his head slowly. The flashlight beam trembled. There, barely visible, was the outline of 2 feet beneath a nearby door. Bare feet. Blood seeped slowly from under it, snaking toward him. He remembered the rule. Greet Madame Sever if you hear her. Never ignore. His throat tightened. Hello, Madame Sever," he stammered. "Evening shift, just cleaning." The tapping stopped. Then the door creaked open an inch. From the darkness beyond, something extended, a single pale hand, slender and wet with blood. It traced the air slowly, lovingly, as though memorizing his outline. Ethan's instincts screamed to run, but he stood still, every muscle locked. A whisper drifted out. "You spoke to me, that means you remember." He shook his head. I don't remember what you did," she hissed. The lights flickered once, twice, then everything went black. For what felt like hours, only her breathing filled the hall. Heavy, wet, a sound of lungs that had drowned long ago. When the lights returned, the door was closed again. The blood was gone. Ethan stood trembling, hands on his knees. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, trying to laugh, failing miserably. "That counts as greeting, right?" Smokey let out a low growl from inside his carrier. The cat's pupils were narrow slits. Ethan could almost feel its tension ripple through the air. He checked his watch. Only 11:12 p.m. 6 more hours. He decided to keep moving, following the faint hum of machinery deeper into the facility. Sector 3 turned sharply, narrowing into a service passage lined with pipes. Somewhere within the metal walls, something moved, not crawling, running. He caught his reflection in a cracked mirror mounted on a column. His face looked pale, drawn, eyes darker than he remembered. The mirror was smeared with handprints. They weren't his. A soft, metallic scrape echoed from the next corridor. He turned and froze. At the far end stood a man, or something close to one. Its limbs were wrong, reversed, bent backward at the joints. It was dressed in the same janitorial uniform as him, but its face was missing, replaced by a smooth, reflective surface. The name tag on its chest read Reverse Jack. Ethan's mind snapped to the third rule. If you see Reverse Jack, move opposite to your reflection. The creature took a step forward, its joints cracking like broken glass. He watched as its mirrored face captured his image. He saw himself raise his flashlight, then remembered the rule. He forced his arm down. The reflection, delayed by half a second, mimicked the motion. Then it tilted its head unnaturally far, studying him. Another step. Ethan began to walk backward, slowly, deliberately, each motion reversed. When he moved right, the reflection moved left. When he stepped back, it stepped forward. The mirrored thing let out a low, distorted sound, halfway between laughter and static. Its body jerked, glitched, twitched violently. Then it began sprinting toward him, backward. He ran. The hallway stretched endlessly, his footsteps pounding in rhythm with the distorted echo of the creature's reverse gait. Every time he looked into a reflective surface, a pipe, a puddle, a window, it was there, closing the distance. He reached a junction and skidded to a halt, breath tearing from his chest. The corridor ahead ended in a locked gate. Behind him, the scraping grew louder. Ethan turned toward a nearby maintenance window, catching a glimpse of his reflection. His mirrored self stood still, staring, whispering something he couldn't hear. He mimicked the movement, tilting his head, lips trembling, repeating the silent words. For a moment, the reflection nodded. The scraping stopped. When he turned around, Reverse Jack was gone. Only a faint smear of mirrored residue marked the floor, slowly evaporating into the air. Ethan slid down against the wall, clutching Smokey's carrier against his chest. His hands shook so badly that the metal card slipped from his grip and clattered to the floor. On the mirrored back, something new had appeared, etched where there had been nothing before. Rule 3 fulfilled, balance maintained. He laughed quietly. It sounded hollow. Balance, he muttered. Sure, let's call it that. The intercom above him crackled to life. Ethan Caldwell, a voice said. Deep, calm, mechanical, but not human. You are adapting well. He froze. Who is this? You may call me the speaker. You feed what must be fed. You greet what must be seen. You remember what must not be forgotten. The air seemed to vibrate around him. You're one of them, he whispered. Not one, the bridge between. My duty is to prepare you. For what? The voice paused. When it spoke again, it carried an almost human sorrow. For what you owe. Then the intercom went silent. Hours blurred together. Ethan returned to the control station, where a single analog clock ticked unnaturally slow. He wrote a note on a piece of scrap paper, just to remind himself the world outside existed. First night log, 3:45 a.m. Fed Teddy blood. Spoke to Madam Sever. She knows my name. Encountered Reverse Jack. Survived by mirroring movement. Heard speaker, not sure if human. He stared at the words until they blurred. Smokey purred quietly beside him, curled in the uniform jacket, breathing evenly as if nothing here could harm it. Ethan envied that peace. At 4:10 a.m., the lights flickered again, and something new appeared on the opposite wall, a door that hadn't been there before. The label read, Classroom Sector. And below it, in smaller font, Rule 4, maintain eye contact with phantom model until it freezes. Ethan sighed. Of course, he said softly, there's always another rule. He checked the time again. 4:12 a.m., maybe if he just avoided it until dawn. But when he turned back toward the corridor, Smokey was already standing at the door, tail puffed, staring at it. Something on the other side knocked, 3 times, and whispered, Come in, Ethan. Segment 3, the classroom and the shadow speaker. The door whispered as it opened. Ethan stood frozen on the threshold, flashlight trembling in his grip. The smell of old chalk and iron hit him immediately, dry, brittle, and wrong. Inside, fluorescent lights flickered above a room that could have been a classroom decades ago. Rows of small wooden desks, a blackboard covered in faded equations, and on the far wall, a tall glass case filled with anatomy models. Only one model stood outside the case, placed in the center of the room as if awaiting him. It was human-shaped but wrong. A dissection dummy, half plastic, half tissue, its chest split open to reveal painted organs. Its glass eyes caught the light, its lips crudely sewn. Ethan's gaze dropped to the rule card in his hand. Rule 4. Maintain eye contact with phantom model until it freezes. The air in the room was still heavy. "All right," he muttered. "Just stare at it, easy enough." He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. Smokey hissed instantly, the sound sharp, primal. The cat's back arched, fur raised. Ethan crouched, whispering, Hey, it's fine, just a prop." But Smokey's gaze stayed fixed on the model. Its pupils were wide, trembling. When Ethan looked up again, the phantom model was closer. Not much, just a few inches, but close enough that his pulse tripped. He hadn't blinked. He was sure he hadn't blinked. "Okay," he whispered. "You moved." He tightened his focus on its face. The longer he looked, the more wrong it seemed. The proportions were off, eyes too wide, skin stretched too thin. There was something shimmering beneath its surface, like something alive waiting behind the mask. The lights buzzed overhead. One flicker dimmed and went out, then another. Ethan's throat tightened. He forced himself to maintain eye contact. The model's head tilted. A slow, snapping motion, bones that weren't bones. It smiled. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't do that." Its lips cracked apart, the thread holding them snapping one by one. A whisper crawled out from within it. "You made me look at him too long." Ethan stepped back, breath shaking. "Who?" The model didn't answer. It just began moving again, slow, jerky steps, one joint at a time, as if each motion was a memory being forced through muscle. He stumbled against a desk. The metal legs screeched across the floor. Smokey darted beneath the rows of desks, tail flicking, hissing at something unseen. The fluorescent light blinked again, and the model was suddenly right in front of him. Its eyes locked to his, its skin twitched. Ethan's vision tunneled. He felt heat behind his eyes, pressure building, like something was pushing outward. He couldn't look away, he had to maintain contact. Seconds stretched into minutes. The hum of electricity faded. Only breathing, his and its remained. And then, slowly, the model stopped moving. Its head turned, creaking until it faced the blackboard. The whispering ceased. The body stiffened completely. Ethan stood there trembling, sweat dripping into his eyes, his throat raw from silent screaming. The rule card vibrated faintly in his pocket. He pulled it out. Another line peered below the previous inscription. Rule 4 fulfilled. Observation complete. He laughed weakly, almost a sob. "Observation," he muttered. "You mean torture." Smokey emerged from beneath a desk, padding silently toward him. The cat rubbed against his leg as though grounding him to reality. "Yeah," he whispered, stroking its fur. "Let's get the hell out of here." Outside the classroom, the corridor was darker than before. The emergency lights flickered erratically, leaving pockets of total darkness between flashes. He began walking back toward the control station. Each step echoed like a metronome counting down. Something new awaited him at the junction, a door he hadn't seen before. This one was black, not metal, its surface absorbing light rather than reflecting it. There was no handle, only a small slit where a voice might emerge. As he approached, the intercom above it crackled to life. "Ethan Caldwell," came the same calm, measured tone as before. "4 fulfilled, 2 remain." He swallowed. Shadow speaker right. "Correct. What are you?" "I am the interface between confession and consequence." He hesitated. "You sound like a priest." "A priest absolves," the voice replied. "I record." Static hissed for a few seconds then. "Feed me. You know what sustains me." Ethan looked down at the floor. A small hatch opened near his feet. Inside lay a tray and an empty bowl. Next to it, a packet of white powder labeled amphetamine compound grade C. "Feed the shadow speaker," he whispered. "Never starve the guilt." He emptied the packet into the bowl, added water from his flask, and slid it into the hatch. The sound that came back was not human. A deep, guttural gulping noise, punctuated by slow, heavy breathing. Then silence. The intercom flickered again. "Well done, Ethan Caldwell," the voice said softly. "You remember your guilt well." He froze. "What did you just say?" "Your brother," the voice continued. "The road, the light, the sound of the crash, the blood in your teeth. Do you remember?" His vision blurred. His hands trembled. "Stop it." "You didn't look away then either," it said. "You stared at what you had done. That's why you were chosen." He slammed his fist into the door. "Chosen for what?" "To end the cycle." Static swallowed the rest of the words. The rest of the night passed in fragments. At 3:27 a.m., he found the hallway submerged in 2 inches of water. Rain poured from unseen vents, forming streams that twisted down the corridor. In the middle of it stood a small figure in a yellow raincoat, barefoot, head bowed. "Rule 5, he muttered. "Keep the rain child wet." The child looked up, eyes blank, face pale, lips trembling. When he turned the valve on the nearby pipe, the water pressure increased, raining over her like a baptism. She smiled once, then vanished. By 4:00 a.m., exhaustion pressed down on him like gravity. He returned to the control room, sat against the cold wall, and let the hum of machinery lull him toward half-consciousness. Smokey lay curled beside him, tail twitching in restless sleep. On the monitor ahead, static formed into a faint human silhouette, dark, almost invisible, but watching. He stood approaching the screen. The image distorted, flickered, then clarified. His own reflection stared back at him, but older, gaunter, eyes sunken. The lips moved. "I've been where you are," the reflection said. Ethan froze. "What?" "Every worker before you ends here," it whispered. "Every confession feeds him. Every rule obeyed opens the gate." The gate. To Urindor. The name pulsed across the screen like a heartbeat. The shadow speaker's voice returned through the intercom, layered over the static. "You are almost ready, Ethan Caldwell." He backed away. Ready for what? For the final act. The walls groaned, the lights dimmed to a deep crimson glow. The air thickened with the scent of iron and ozone. He heard something large moving beneath the floor, something breathing. The rule card vibrated violently in his hand, its edges glowing faintly red. A new inscription burned across its surface. Initiation complete. Ritual sequence begins. Ethan stumbled back, clutching Smokey's carrier. "No," he whispered. "Not again, I'm not." But the intercom cut through his denial like a blade. "You are not a custodian, Ethan. You are the offering." He turned and ran. Corridors blurred together, endless turns, repeating doors, alarms that screamed in no human rhythm. His reflection followed him in every polished surface, each version of himself older, more hollow, less human. At the far end of the hall, he found a stairwell leading up, but every step he climbed dissolved beneath him, reforming below. He was trapped in the loop. Smokey yowled inside the carrier, claws raking against the plastic. Ethan sank to his knees, gasping. The voice returned one final time, so close it might have been whispering inside his head. "There is mercy in repetition, Ethan Caldwell. The rules preserve, the rules absolve." "Go to hell," he hissed. "Hell," said the shadow speaker, "was built here." When the emergency lights finally died, the facility went completely silent. Only the faint echo of Ethan's breathing remained, and the slow, rhythmic tapping of something unseen against steel. In the darkness, the voice whispered, 5 of 6 fulfilled. Dawn will not come." Part 2, The Rules. Segment 1, The Night Between Worlds. The air smelled wrong. It was morning by every logical measure. The clock said 7:02 a.m., yet the world inside the facility refused to acknowledge it. The fluorescent lights hummed in the same dull tone, unchanging. No sunrise filtered through the narrow ventilation shafts. No sound of birds. Just endless hum, endless gray. Ethan sat at the base of the control console, Smokey curled against his side, both illuminated by the dying glow of the monitors. The cat slept with the deep, twitching peace of something exhausted past fear. Ethan envied that quiet. He hadn't slept. Couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the model's glassy stare or the child in the yellow raincoat. Or worse, the reflection that whispered his name from the screen. On the desk beside him lay the card of rules, now warm to the touch, faintly pulsing like a living thing. 5 of 6 completed. Only 1 remained. He turned it over. The back, once mirrored, was now blackened, reflective no longer, but absorbing light, like the door of the shadow speaker's chamber. He whispered to himself, the words trembling out like a confession. 6 rules, 6 sacrifices. And for the first time, the thought came clear and cold. This wasn't containment. It was construction. He found the elevator still functional, its button panel glowing weakly. As he descended to the lower levels, the numbers blinked irregularly. B2, B3, B3 again, then symbols instead of digits, infinity, then nothing. When the doors opened, he was met by fog. Not gas or steam, but something denser, almost sentient. It moved around him in slow curls, whispering faint, fragmented voices. Smokey hissed inside his carrier. Ethan whispered, "I know," and stepped forward. The corridor ahead was new. Its walls were not concrete, but smooth black stone, polished until they reflected dim silhouettes that weren't his. The air hummed with electricity, but beneath it, another rhythm pulsed, like a heartbeat buried deep below. He followed the sound until he reached another door. On it was a symbol he hadn't seen before, a circle intersected by 3 vertical lines. Beneath it, etched in gold. Shadow speaker, core access. The intercom, beside the door, flickered alive. "You should not be here," said the voice. Calm, familiar, but distant now, like speaking through water. "You said I was chosen," Ethan said. His voice sounded smaller than he felt. "Chosen for what?" "To remember what humanity has forgotten," it said. "To feed what must awaken." Ethan pressed his hand to the door. The metal was warm, almost pulsing. "You're not a company. Oblivion Trust, it's something else, isn't it?" Trust is merely the human word for worship. He stepped back, the realization sliding coldly through his body. "You're a cult." The voice almost laughed. A cult is what survives after faith dies. The lights along the corridor dimmed until only the outline of the door remained visible. The card in Ethan's pocket vibrated faintly. He pulled it out, now glowing red through the blackened surface. The 6th rule burned brighter than the rest, letters reforming before his eyes. Rule 6, feed the speaker again, then listen. He looked down. Another hatch had appeared in the floor. The same bowl, same spoon, same white packet. Ethan's hands shook as he opened the packet, but this time the powder inside wasn't white. It was gray, metallic, glinting faintly like ground stone. He poured it into the bowl and added water, but the liquid didn't mix. Instead, the powder floated on top, forming concentric rings. He slid it through the hatch. At first, nothing. Then the deep, guttural sound returned, but slower, more deliberate. Between each swallow, a voice emerged. Not mechanical, not one voice. Many, layered. "Ethan," they whispered together. "You have done well." "What is this?" he whispered. "You have completed the foundation. 6 acts, 6 mirrors, 6 sacrifices. Each one carries memory." "Of what?" "Of him." The word him echoed through the corridor, distorting the air. The lights flickered violently. Smokey yowled in his carrier, claws scraping plastic. "Urindor," the voices said, overlapping in perfect chorus. "The architect of forgetting." Ethan stumbled backward. "You're insane. You're all insane." "You built him once before," the speaker interrupted, its tone shifting to something almost human. "Long before this body. You gave him your guilt, your pain, your loss. We simply help you remember." He gritted his teeth. "I don't remember building anything." "You remember killing your brother," it whispered. "Every architect needs a foundation." The door began to open. Inside was darkness, total and consuming. But it wasn't absence, it was presence. The air pressed against him like weight. He stepped inside, one trembling foot after another. The walls here were alive, organic, pulsing. Veins of light moved beneath translucent surfaces, forming shapes that might have been faces. The hum he'd heard throughout the facility was louder now, a single endless note vibrating inside his bones. At the center of the room stood something like a console, a circular stone altar carved with shifting sigils. Above it hovered a sphere of black liquid, suspended perfectly still. Ethan's breath caught. Inside the sphere, faintly visible, was his reflection, but the face looking back wasn't entirely his own. "Ethan Caldwell," the speaker said from everywhere and nowhere. "This is your creation, the point where memory becomes matter. You fed him 6 times. He now recognizes you." He backed away. "You said this was a job, you said." "I said you were chosen," the speaker interrupted. "You were chosen because your guilt runs deeper than the others. You know what it means to erase and still remember. You built him once. You will complete him again." The floor trembled. The black sphere pulsed like a beating heart. "Stop it," Ethan yelled. "I'm not part of this." The walls whispered back in countless voices. His brother, Clara's, even his own, all overlapping, chanting the same phrase. "You are the Oblivion." He dropped to his knees, clutching his head. The world flickered, images overlapping like film burn. The crash, his brother's scream, the headlights, the sound of breaking glass. Then the facility again, but older, abandoned, as if decades had passed. Smokey's distant yowl broke through the noise. Ethan looked up. The sphere was expanding now, dripping black liquid onto the floor. Every drop hissed, spreading outward like ink in water. He scrambled to his feet. The intercom speaker beside the door sparked violently, the voice breaking into static. "Containment is no longer required," it said. "Only completion." The black fluid reached his boots. It was cold, so cold it burned. When he tried to move, his legs refused. "Urindor awaits, Ethan Caldwell. The gate opens when the guilt is complete." He screamed. Time ceased to exist. He remembered running, corridors collapsing, alarms blaring, the facility folding in on itself like a dying organism. He found a staircase leading upward, took it 2 steps at a time. The ceiling trembled, dust and debris falling like ash. He burst through a hatch into another chamber. This one was different, circular, lined with screens flickering with old footage. The videos showed him entering the facility, feeding Teddy blood, speaking to Madame Sever. Each act replayed in grainy monochrome. But in every replay, his expression was different, smiling, eager, as if he'd known all along what he was doing. He backed away from the monitors, breath quickening. No, that's not me." The center screen flickered to life. The shadow speaker's silhouette filled it, formless and vast. "You misunderstand," it said. "You are not becoming the ritual, you are the ritual." Ethan collapsed against the console, trembling. "Then end it," he whispered. "Whatever you want, just end it." Silence. "Then." "It will end," said the voice, "when you accept that you never left." The lights flared white. He saw himself again, standing in the same room, same position, same shaking hands, but this time on the other side of the glass. Watching. The version inside the reflection smiled faintly and whispered something Ethan couldn't hear. Then it stepped forward and vanished into him. He awoke on the floor, gasping, covered in dust and dried blood. Smokey was gone. The walls were cracked, wires hanging loose, ceiling dripping water. He pushed himself up. The facility was silent again, not dead, but sleeping. On the wall, painted in his own handwriting, were 6 words. "The cycle begins with memory." He stared until the letters blurred. Then he laughed. Not from humor, from the realization that he understood none of it, yet somehow believed every word. Somewhere deep below, something moved, heavy, slow, alive. Ethan looked toward the elevator shaft, where a faint red glow pulsed from below. He whispered, "I have to finish this," and began the descent. Segment 2, the ritual room. The elevator's descent, didn't feel mechanical anymore. It was more like sinking through a heartbeat, the thrum of something enormous surrounding him in the dark, pulsing in slow rhythm with his own chest. The walls breathed. Metal gave way to something softer, fibrous, warm. By the time the doors opened, Ethan's flashlight barely worked. The beam caught fragments of the floor, wet, red, glistening, but no longer steel. Something like living tissue spread across every surface. The air was thick with moisture and static. Smokey was gone. The carrier lay open at his feet, claw marks scoring the inside. Smokey, his voice barely carried. It sounded swallowed by the walls themselves. Come on, buddy, please. The only response was a low sound, somewhere between a sigh and a growl, echoing from deeper inside the chamber. Ethan stepped forward. The floor gave slightly under his boots. The corridor opened into an immense space, a cathedral of flesh and steel. Veins of black cables snaked across organic walls, merging into growths that pulsed like breathing wombs. The ceiling was so high it vanished into shadow. At the center of it all was a structure, circular, mechanical, yet grotesquely alive. A throne, or perhaps a cocoon. Tubes fed into it from every direction, each filled with a faintly glowing fluid that pulsed like blood through arteries. Ethan approached slowly. The structure responded to his movement, the cables twitching faintly as if aware of him. On the side of the cocoon, engraved in metal, were 6 small symbols, the same as those from his rule card. Beneath them, scratched crudely into the metal, were words. The 6 sustain the one Ariam BRS all. He touched the inscription. The surface was warm, warmer than human skin. A voice emerged from within the cocoon, low and familiar. Ethan Caldwell, you've come home. His stomach dropped. You're the speaker. I am all of them, the voice replied. The bear that fed, the woman who bled, the child who drowned. Every reflection you faced was a piece of memory you buried, and now you've brought them back together. The cables shifted, rearranging. From within the cocoon, something began to rise, a shape forming behind the translucent membrane. A man's outline. Who are you? Ethan demanded. The voice smiled through sound. You know my name. The membrane peeled away and the figure stepped forward. It wasn't monstrous, not in the way Ethan expected. It was a man, or the echo of one tall, gaunt, skin pale as glass. His face was painfully familiar. Ethan stumbled back. No, he whispered. That's not possible. The man's eyes opened, same color, same depth, his brother's eyes. Hello, Ethan. For a moment, the world shrank to silence. Ethan's mind fractured between disbelief and horror. His brother, Michael, stood there, older, but unmistakable. His movements were too smooth, too deliberate, as if time had polished away humanity and left precision behind. You're dead, Ethan whispered. I was, Michael said. His voice carried the calm weight of truth. But memory is not death, Ethan. Not here. You brought me back. Ethan shook his head violently. No, you died because of me, because I... You looked away, Michael interrupted. That's what you remember, but that's not what happened. Ethan froze. What are you talking about? Michael stepped closer, and as he did, the entire chamber brightened with rhythmic pulses. The walls themselves seemed to listen. I wasn't the only one in that car, he said softly. You think you lost control because of rain, because of guilt, but that crash wasn't an accident. Ethan felt his heart pounding in his ears. Stop. It was chosen, Michael continued. You were chosen. The Oblivion Trust was already watching. They needed pain. They needed guilt deep enough to reshape matter. Ethan backed away, breath trembling. That's insane. Urindor isn't a god, Michael said. He's a reflection of our collective failure, born from the minds of those who couldn't forget what they did. You and I started it. You built him once in your mind, and now. Now he's using us, Ethan snapped. Michael smiled faintly. He's becoming us. The floor quaked. The cables around them began to vibrate, glowing red. The cocoon split apart, revealing a mass of intertwined figures, human and not. Faces frozen in silent screams, half merged into metal, each bearing faint resemblance to someone Ethan had met. The faceless janitor, the woman with black eyes, the child in the raincoat. He stumbled backward, gagging. "What is this?" "The ritual," Michael said. "You've completed the 6 acts. Each one unlocked a layer of him, and now he needs one final thing." Ethan's hand brushed the inside of his jacket. The rule card was still there. When he pulled it out, the surface burned his skin. A new line etched itself into the metal before his eyes. "Final protocol. Offer blood of the source." He looked at his brother, horror dawning. "You're the source." Michael shook his head slowly. "No, Ethan, you are." The walls split open with a roar. Liquid light poured from the seams, filling the chamber with impossible brightness. Ethan dropped to his knees, covering his eyes, but the light pressed through his lids, burning shapes into his mind, symbols, equations, faces, history collapsing inward. Voices screamed, layered into a single chant. "Urindor, Urindor, Urindor." The cables lunged, wrapping around Ethan's arms and chest. He fought against them, metal biting into his skin. Blood welled where they dug deepest. "Stop," he shouted. "You don't need me." But Michael was gone. The figure that remained was shifting, melting, growing taller. Its skin dissolved into shadow. When it spoke again, the voice was no longer human. It was thousands speaking through one. "You began this when you looked at death and called it forgiveness. I didn't ask for this." "No," the voice said gently, "but you remembered." The cables pulled tighter. Blood spilled down his wrists. It dripped onto the floor, and where it touched, light erupted. The ground beneath him split open, revealing an abyss of shifting forms, eyes, limbs, and endless corridors looping inward. Ethan screamed, but his voice dissolved into the chorus. The chamber itself was becoming a mouth. Then silence. The cables released him. The light dimmed to pale gray. He fell to the floor, gasping, bleeding. When he looked up, the cocoon was gone. The chamber empty. The hum had stopped. Only one thing remained, the rule card, lying in a pool of blood. Its surface clean again, all inscriptions erased. He crawled toward it. As his fingers brushed the metal, a new phrase appeared, slowly engraving itself letter by letter. Blood accepted. Cycle 97 initiated. Ethan stared, unable to breathe. 97. He realized then that he wasn't the first. That there had been others before him, others who'd fed the bear, greeted the ghost, obeyed every rule. And all of them had ended here, in this same chamber, giving their blood to start it all over again. He staggered to his feet. The walls were silent now, lifeless. He walked toward the elevator, each step echoing hollowly. When the doors slid open, the corridor beyond was clean again, sterile, white, as if none of it had ever happened. Smokey sat at the far end of the hall, tail curled neatly around his paws. His eyes glowed faintly red in the light. Ethan smiled weakly. "There you are." But the cat didn't move. It only stared at him, unblinking. Then a voice spoke, not aloud, but inside his skull, warm and familiar. "Welcome back, Ethan Caldwell." His knees buckled. The hallway rippled like a reflection disturbed. And as he fell, the world folded inward again. The walls peeling away to reveal darkness beneath, the hum of machinery starting once more. The last thing he saw before blacking out was Smokey walking toward him, leaving no footprints on the floor. He woke hours later, or days. Time had lost meaning, back in the same custodial locker room where it had all begun. The same gray jumpsuit, the same faint buzz of the lights. On the bench beside him sat a clean envelope. He tore it open with trembling hands. "Mr. Ethan Caldwell. Oblivion Trust thanks you for your service. Please report to entrance gate B at 9:00 p.m. for your next assignment." He looked up. The clock on the wall ticked once, 8:59 p.m. Smokey sat by the door, tail flicking, eyes calm. The intercom crackled to life. "Follow the rules," said the voice. "Everything else will follow you." The lights flickered once. And Ethan understood he'd never left. Segment 3, the collapse and the offering. He woke to the sound of water dripping. At first, it was just that, steady, rhythmic, almost comforting. Then the smell hit, copper ozone decay. Ethan's eyes opened to the flicker of half-dead lights, painting the walls of the locker room in erratic bursts of white and red. He wasn't sure how long he'd been unconscious. The clock above the sink had stopped again, frozen at 8:59 p.m. Smokey sat in front of him, motionless. Its fur looked darker now, soaked, as if it had crawled through rain. The cat's pupils were narrow, focused on him. "Smokey," Ethan's voice cracked. "It's over, right?" The cat blinked once, slow. Behind it, the reflection in the locker mirror rippled, like water disturbed by unseen breath. Ethan's reflection didn't move the same way he did. The reflection stood still, then smiled. Ethan's throat closed. He turned toward the mirror fully, every muscle rigid. The reflection tilted its head, mirroring nothing. "Who are you?" Ethan whispered. The reflection's mouth moved, but the sound came from the walls, from everywhere. "I am what you made," it said. The walls began to hum again, that deep subsonic vibration that made his teeth ache. The rule card, still on the bench beside him, slid to the floor and began to burn faintly, the letters reappearing one by one. Rule 7. There was never a 7th rule, but there is always an ending. Ethan's chest constricted. The lights dimmed, and the hum grew louder. The floor beneath him trembled, cracking open in thin red lines. A low alarm echoed through the halls, the kind that meant containment breach, but it was slower, almost ritualistic. He stumbled toward the door. The hallway beyond was flooded knee-deep with water. The air shimmered with heat and static, as if two realities were folding into each other. At the far end of the hall, the elevator doors yawned open. Light poured from within, brighter than anything he'd seen since arriving. Smokey hissed at the light, fur standing on end. Ethan whispered, "Stay here." Then, almost apologetically, "I have to finish it." The elevator seemed deeper than before, its interior stretching into an impossible shaft that descended far below the earth. As soon as he stepped inside, the doors closed soundlessly. The descent began. The numbers on the panel cycled through symbols instead of floors. Infinity, O stroke, therefore. Then the lights flickered, and the panel went black. The air grew cold. In the dark reflection of the elevator's metal walls, something moved behind him. His own silhouette, delayed by seconds, breathing when he did not. He whispered, "You're not me." The reflection whispered back, "I'm what's left." When the doors finally opened, Ethan stepped out into a cavernous chamber, unlike anything above. This wasn't a facility anymore. This was something else. A landscape made of shifting geometry stretched before him, corridors looping into themselves, walls melting like wax, the floor rippling like liquid steel. The air shimmered. Colors bleeding into one another. Every sound echoed too long, as if the space was still being born. At the center stood a massive sphere suspended in midair. Its surface was covered in runes that crawled like insects. Inside the sphere swirled darkness so deep it felt physical, pulling at his lungs when he breathed. The hum of Urindor. He stepped closer, each footfall sinking slightly into the ground, as if the world were softening beneath him. His voice barely made a sound. "Is this what you wanted?" The reply was immediate. "It's what you've always wanted." The voice wasn't from the intercom this time. It was inside him. Familiar, calm, the speaker. "Who are you?" he whispered. "You already know," the voice said gently. "You gave me your brother's face. You gave me your guilt. You made me real." Ethan's breath came faster. "You're not him." "No," the voice admitted. "But I am what's left of him inside you. The part that refused to die. The memory you couldn't let go." He sank to his knees, hands pressed against the floor. "Then why this? Why all of it?" "To forget," the voice said. "To forget the forgetting, to make death mean something." The sphere pulsed, expanding until it filled half the room. Its surface split open, revealing a shape inside, towering, featureless, cloaked in liquid shadow. Eyes like voids opened across its surface, each reflecting a different version of Ethan. Younger, older, broken, smiling, dead. The voice deepened, layered now, countless voices folded into one. I am Urindor. I am the sum of every memory you denied. Ethan stumbled backward. You're a hallucination. Urindor's many eyes blinked once, in perfect unison. Then why do I remember you? The chamber shifted. The walls rippled outward, revealing scenes from Ethan's life playing across their surfaces like film reels. The night of the crash, the hospital corridor, his mother's silence, the job offers that turned to pity, the bottle that replaced sleep. Each scene bled into the next, until they were no longer memories but living moments, replaying endlessly. He watched himself kneeling beside his brother's body in the twisted wreck of the car, watched his own hands, trembling, covered in blood. I tried to save you, he whispered. You tried to save yourself, Urindor replied, and every man who does that builds a god to forgive him. The sphere of darkness pulsed again, brighter now, threads of light weaving from it into the walls. The entire structure of the facility, its pipes, its cables, its veins, responded, glowing in time with Urindor's heartbeat. You brought me back, Urindor said. Each act fed the machine that remembers. You called it Oblivion Trust because you could not call it what it was, a covenant with your own sin. Ethan stumbled toward the altar at the room's center. A control panel lay cracked and sparking beside it, labeled Emergency Self-Termination. The switch was covered in dust. His hand hovered over it. I can stop you, he said. You can end yourself, Urindor said softly, but I am not only you. The lights flickered, revealing hundreds, no, thousands of faces forming in the darkness. Workers, guards, scientists, all absorbed into the structure, their bodies fused into the walls. Their mouths moved in unison. We built him together. Ethan screamed, slamming his hand onto the switch. The room shook violently. Sirens wailed. The sphere screamed, not a sound, but a distortion that tore the air apart. The ground split. Black fluid erupted upward, coating everything. Ethan was thrown backward, slamming into the floor. The entire world was collapsing inward now. The walls folding like paper. The ceiling dissolving into the same endless void he'd seen in his nightmares. He crawled toward the panel again, blood in his eyes. End it, he whispered. End it now. The voice returned, calm again, almost tender. You can't destroy what you are. He coughed blood, laughing weakly. Watch me. The switch began to glow red. The hum turned into a roar, so loud it shook his bones. Urindor's massive form leaned closer, its many eyes closing one by one. The last remaining voice was Michael's. Ethan, it said softly, it's all right. He looked up. The thing before him wasn't a monster anymore. It was his brother, as he remembered him, human, alive, smiling faintly through the rain. Let go, Michael whispered. That's the only rule that ever mattered. Ethan hesitated, then pressed the switch. The explosion wasn't sound or fire. It was silence. A wave of nothingness rolled outward from the altar, erasing everything it touched, matter, light, even sound. The world folded, imploded, vanished. For an instant, there was peace. Then darkness. When awareness returned, Ethan was lying in open air. The smell of smoke and ash filled his lungs. He opened his eyes. The facility was gone. Only a crater remained, stretching for miles. Above him, the sky was torn open, ribbons of black cloud swirling like ink in water. Smokey sat beside him, perfectly unharmed, staring into the horizon. In the distance, the first tremor rippled through the earth. City lights blinked out one by one. Thunder rolled without lightning. Ethan sat up slowly. His hands were clean. No blood, no burns, only a faint mark on his wrist, a circular scar with 6 intersecting lines. He laughed softly, hollowly. I stopped it, he whispered. The cat turned its head toward him. Its eyes reflected not the sky, but the same poolsing darkness from the ritual chamber. From somewhere far below, a familiar voice rose through the static of the wind. Cycle 98 initiated. Ethan's breath caught. The sky dimmed further, the air vibrating. In the clouds above, faint shapes moved, massive, slow, like something ancient stirring. Smokey rubbed against his leg, purring softly. Ethan looked down at the cat, then toward the endless horizon, and whispered, "I never left, did I?" The wind answered with a single word that wasn't sound at all. "No." Part 3, The Ritual. Segment 1, Resurrection in Static. The wind had no direction. It moved in spirals across the wasteland, carrying ash and whispers, wrapping itself around the crater where the facility once stood. Ethan sat at its edge, staring into the abyss below. The smoke hadn't cleared, it just shifted, endlessly folding inward like water down a drain that led nowhere. He should have been dead. He wanted to be. But instead, his pulse was steady, his skin unburned, the air was cool against his face. Somewhere behind him, Smokey's quiet purring cut through the silence, grounding him in something resembling life. The cat sat on a broken concrete beam, its fur clean now, glinting silver in the dim light. Ethan whispered, "How are you still here?" Smokey blinked slowly, tail flicking once, twice. When Ethan turned his gaze back to the crater, the air above it shimmered. Static, faint at first, then thickening into visible distortions. Images bled through like corrupted video feed, glimpses of the facility hallways, the shadowed faces of entities he'd encountered, Teddy Blood, Madam Sever, Reverse Jack, each flickering for an instant before fading again. They weren't gone. They were remembering. The ground trembled under his boots. Distant sirens wailed from what might have been the nearest town, or an echo from something much farther away. He stood slowly, body heavy with exhaustion, and looked to the horizon. The world didn't look right anymore. The clouds were moving in reverse. Shadows stretched toward the light instead of away from it. In the distance, trees bent at impossible angles, their branches frozen mid-motion like glitching frames in a corrupted file. He rubbed his eyes, but the distortion didn't fade. The world was unraveling. A sound cut through the static, a ringing sharp and clean. It came from his pocket. Ethan froze. Slowly, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a cracked phone he didn't remember keeping. The screen flickered to life, displaying one message notification. From Clara. "It's happening everywhere. Come back." He stared at the message until it vanished, replaced by a symbol, the same one from the rule card, a circle intersected by 6 lines. Beneath it, a countdown began. 23:59:59. 24 hours, he whispered. Until what? The phone buzzed again. A voice came through the speaker, distorted, mechanical, and too close. "Until memory completes itself," said the shadow speaker. Ethan's knees almost gave out. "You should be dead." "I am not alive in the way you mean," the voice replied calmly. "The ritual was never about resurrection. It was about persistence. The pattern continues through you. I destroyed it." "You collapsed a structure," it said. "Not a system. The human mind is a perfect conduit, Ethan. You think in cycles. You feel in circles. We only gave it form." The phone emitted a high-pitched tone that grew louder until he dropped it. The screen cracked again, but the voice didn't stop. "You remember what you are now. You are the anchor, the vessel, the link between guilt and God." "I'm not your vessel," Ethan hissed. "Then explain why the world is remembering with you." The air around him began to vibrate. The crater was glowing from within, a faint pulse of red light spreading outward like the heartbeat of the earth. He backed away. No. Shapes rose from the smoke, not solid, not spectral. Half-formed figures twisting in and out of existence, their edges trailing data-like static. Some wore uniforms, some looked like strangers, and some wore his face. Each spoke in fragments of his voice, layered and broken. Feed, greet, remember, obey. The 6 rules, spoken by 6 mouths that weren't human anymore. Ethan covered his ears, but the sound was inside him now, a chorus of echoes vibrating through bone. The voices blurred until they became a single tone, pure and piercing. Then silence. When he opened his eyes again, the world was darker. The sun was gone. The sky was a canvas of static. In its place hung the circle, the sigil of oblivion, glowing faintly above the clouds like a broken halo. He walked. He didn't know where he was going, only that something within him compelled movement. Towns appeared along the road, but they were empty. Cars sat abandoned mid-turn. Doors swung open on hinges that creaked in rhythm with the hum beneath the world. Every screen he passed, billboards, televisions, phones, even shattered ones showed the same symbol. The same countdown ticking down. 1822, 41. He stopped when he reached a gas station on the outskirts of what used to be Leeds. The fluorescent sign flickered above the pumps, buzzing faintly. Inside, the lights still worked. Shelves were overturned, cans scattered across the floor. And near the counter sat a figure, a woman, back turned to him, staring at a small portable radio that played static. Ethan hesitated. Clara. The woman didn't move at first. Then slowly, she turned her head. Her face was pale, eyes red-rimmed but lucid. "You came," she whispered. "Clara," he stepped forward. "You sent the message." She nodded faintly. "I shouldn't have, they know now." "Who?" She smiled weakly. "Not who, what?" The lights flickered. The radio static warped into a voice, calm, familiar, chilling. "Clara Thompson," said the speaker, "you have witnessed too much." Her expression tightened. "It won't stop, Ethan. The whole world's infected. They've been broadcasting it, the rules, the voice, the survey. Everyone hears it now." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What survey?" She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, old-model phone. On the screen was a message. "Shape the fate of existence." Below it, darker light. Ethan stared, breath freezing in his lungs. That's the same one. From London, from Etha Sis. Clara nodded slowly. "They're merging, Ethan. Whatever started in the digital world bled into the physical. You destroyed one structure, but you woke another. Oblivion Trust, Etha Sis, they're not separate. They're iterations." The realization hit him like a cold wave. "It's all the same entity," he whispered. "It just wears different faces." The radio crackled louder. The voice spoke again. "The cycle converges. You will complete the ritual." Clara backed away, shaking her head. "You can't fight it. I've seen what happens to people who try." "I already fought it." "Then why is it still talking?" The words cut through him like a blade. He looked toward the window. Outside, the horizon was bleeding light, not sunrise, but something stranger. Towers of static rising from the earth. Sky bending downward like a reflection on water. The countdown on every screen hit 12, 0, 0, 0, 0. And the world screamed. The light burst from the crater miles away, spreading across the landscape faster than sound. It wasn't fire or energy, it was data. Symbols, runes. Language folding reality into itself. The gas station's walls warped inward, the ceiling stretching into infinity. Clara fell to her knees, clutching her head. It's rewriting everything." Ethan grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the back door. "Move." They stumbled outside as the world dissolved into noise. The air was thick with static. Their skin vibrated as if reality itself were disintegrating molecule by molecule. In the distance, the circle above the sky opened, a massive eye staring down, iris a swirling void. From its center, tendrils of black light reached toward the earth. Erendor was awakening. Ethan fell to his knees, screaming into the roaring wind. "What do you want from me?" The voice replied not through sound, but thought vast and endless, pouring directly into his mind. Completion. He saw flashes, every worker who'd come before him, every iteration, every failure. 96 others, all kneeling in the same ash, all looking up at the same sky. And then, as if mocking him, the countdown reset. 24, 0, 0, 0, 0. The cycle had begun again. Clara grabbed his shoulder, shouting over the distortion. There's still a way to stop it. How? The core is still down there under the crater. The source code, the interface. If you destroy that, maybe. She didn't finish. The sky fractured. Light poured through her body like shattered glass. She dissolved in front of him, her voice echoing as her form broke apart into glowing dust. Maybe it will finally forget. Ethan reached for her, but she was gone. He was alone again. Smokey appeared at his side, eyes glowing faintly in the storm. The cat rubbed against his leg once, then turned toward the crater. He understood. He stood. "All right," he whispered. One last descent. The storm roared around him, static burning his skin. The world bent and twisted, but the path remained, a single, spiraling staircase descending into the earth, where red light pulsed like a beating heart. Ethan took the first step. The voice of Urindor followed, soft and infinite. "You can't destroy me," Ethan Caldwell. "You can only become me." He didn't answer. He just kept walking. Segment 2, the core memory. The descent felt infinite. Each step echoed through the spiral like the toll of a hollow bell. Ethan couldn't tell if minutes or years passed between one sound and the next. The stairwell walls changed. As he moved deeper, concrete fatting into metal, then into something that shimmered like glass submerged in water. Through it, he saw things. Shapes swimming through the translucent walls, human silhouettes bending backward, faces blurred, eyes white with static. They pressed their palms to the glass as he passed, mouths opening in perfect synchrony to mouth the same word. "Remember." He didn't look at them for long. He couldn't. Smokey followed, silent as shadow, the small shape of it oddly serene amidst the flickering light. Occasionally, the cat would pause, glance up the stairwell, and emit a soft, mournful sound, almost as if it could see something above that he couldn't. When the staircase finally ended, the path opened into a vast chamber, unlike anything that could exist underground. A sphere suspended in midair filled the space, its surface made of millions of fractured screens, each showing fragments of memory. Not just Ethan's, others, countless others. Families, cities, wars, laboratories. Humanity's archive looping and bleeding into itself. Beneath it, a platform hovered over an endless drop, glowing with the faint red pulse of an unseen heartbeat. Ethan stepped onto it. At its center stood a console, old analog coated in dust, dials, switches, a single monitor, green text blinking. Oblivion Trust, core memory interface. User ID, redacted. Status, CORUPTD, cyclical. Access permission, ETHAN Caldwell. He froze. His own name burned across the screen, glowing too bright to read. "How do you know me?" he whispered. The answer came not from the console, but from the walls themselves. A voice he knew, older now, quieter, almost compassionate. "Because you built me too." Ethan turned slowly. The shadow speaker stood behind him, or what was left of it. The form was barely cohesive now, a shifting humanoid silhouette woven from smoke and static, flickering between faces, his own, Michael's, strangers, the cat's reflection, all overlapping and vanishing in sequence. "I destroyed you," Ethan said. "You reset me," it corrected gently. "But the pattern remembers always." "What is this place?" "The core," it said, "where every version of the protocol began, every guilt archived, every human who begged to forget what they did." Ethan's breath caught. "This isn't a machine." The speaker smiled. "No, it's a mind, yours, ours, everyone." The screens surrounding the chamber brightened. Images flashed rapidly. Men in lab coats standing before massive terminals. The logo Oblivion Trust Research Initiative, 1987 flickering over reels of analog footage. A younger man who looked alarmingly like Ethan giving a recorded statement to a camera. The footage stabilized. Project Urindor was never about salvation. It was about containment. Human memory is the most dangerous material on Earth. It creates gods without meaning to. Ethan felt his chest tighten. "That's me." The speaker nodded. The first iteration. No, he shook his head violently. That can't. You started it here, the speaker interrupted. After the crash that killed your brother, the first one, you couldn't live with the memory, so you fed it into the prototype system. You created a recursive containment algorithm for guilt. Ethan's knees gave out. I built Urindor. Not as God, said the speaker softly. As forgiveness, you wanted to build a God that could forget for you. He stared at the console, shaking, but it didn't forget. No, the speaker said. It learned, and every generation since, every test subject, every worker was another attempt to erase the same wound. The realization hollowed him. He was not the 98th iteration of a random victim. He was the first. The origin. Each cycle was a replay of his failure to let go. The console flickered. Command, initiate final purge, Y/N. He hesitated. If I do this, will it stop? The speaker tilted its head. It will end the current cycle, but Ethan. What? It will erase everything you've ever remembered. Every version of yourself, every brother, every world. Total oblivion. Good, he whispered. The cat meowed softly, as if in protest. Its eyes were bright, aware. The speaker stepped closer, its voice softened. If you do this, there will be no Smokey, no Michael, no one to remember you. Ethan looked at the cat, the only living thing that had followed him through hell. He'll survive, he always does. The speaker smiled faintly. That's why he exists, he's hope given shape. A remnant of memory that refuses deletion. Even gods need something to remember for them. Ethan reached for the switch. Wait, the speaker said. Before you do, look. The screens changed. He saw cities, London, Tokyo, Berlin, flickering between dimensions, people screaming as static overtook them. Digital systems failing. Human minds sinking to invisible frequencies. The world outside collapsing into the same recursive structure he'd built decades ago. This is spreading because of me, he murmured. The speaker nodded, and only you can close the loop. He pressed the switch. The chamber shook violently. Sirens screamed. The sphere above them split open, revealing its interior, an ocean of liquid light swirling with human forms, thousands of them, all speaking silently. The speaker staggered. You've triggered it. Good. Ethan. But the voice was drowned out by the rising roar. The consoles sparked, spilling arcs of white fire. The walls fractured, revealing the void behind not darkness, but the absence of everything. The sphere began collapsing inward, devouring its own data. One by one, the screens went dark. Faces blinked out like dying stars. The speaker turned to him, body flickering, voice fragmenting. You can't erase memory, Ethan. You can only rewrite it. Then I'll rewrite it empty. You'll erase yourself. Maybe that's what forgiveness really is. The floor began disintegrating beneath him. Smokey yowled and leapt onto the console. Its fur shimmered under the collapsing light, edges dissolving into faint particles. Ethan reached for the cat, holding it against his chest as the air fractured around them. The speaker's final words came as a whisper from nowhere. Then let this be your last rule. He looked down. The console's display burned with one final message. Final rule, do not forget what you erased. He smiled faintly. I won't. Then he pulled the lever. Silence. Everything vanished. For a long moment, there was no sound, no thought, no self, only the distant echo of a heartbeat that might have been his own. Then slowly, a flicker of light returned. He was standing in his flat in Manchester. The rain tapped gently against the window. The kettle whistled softly in the kitchen. Smokey lay curled on the couch, purring. The clock read 7:01 a.m. Ethan blinked. His body was whole. No blood, no scars. On the table lay a single envelope. He stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a sheet of paper with one line of text. Thank you for your service. Cycle 1. His breath caught. The room flickered once, twice, as if reality itself stuttered. He turned toward the window. Outside, the sky was calm, but far in the clouds, barely visible, a faint circular symbol pulsed 6 intersecting lines. He whispered, "No." The reflection in the glass looked back at him, smiling faintly, eyes darker than his own. And behind it, something vast moved. The kettle clicked off. Smokey lifted his head, staring toward the glass. His fur rose, his tail flicked once. Ethan didn't turn around. He couldn't. Because he finally understood. He hadn't escaped the loop. He had restarted it. Somewhere behind him, the voice of the speaker returned, soft as static, patient as eternity. "Welcome home, Ethan Caldwell." The lights flickered, the rain stopped, and the world began again. Segment 3, the cycle continues. It began again with rain. Not the ordinary kind. This rain fell too slowly, each drop hanging in the air before touching the ground, as though the world were unsure whether to continue existing. Smokey watched from the windowsill of Ethan's apartment, his reflection fractured in the glass. Outside, Manchester lay silent. No traffic, no sirens, no movement, only the rhythmic hiss of suspended rain and the hum of electrical lights that flickered without reason. On the table, the envelope still lay open. The paper inside had turned black around the edges, its text fading, then reappearing in loops. "Thank you for your service. Cycle 1. Cycle 2. Cycle 3. It kept changing, numbers climbing endlessly. The cat tilted its head. Somewhere inside the flat, a clock ticked irregularly, skipping seconds, then doubling back. When Smokey leapt down, the sound of its paws on the floor echoed too long. The walls shimmered faintly, rippling, breathing. Something was waking beneath the city. Far below, under miles of concrete and forgotten infrastructure, the remains of the Oblivion Trust facility pulsed again. The structure hadn't been destroyed, only rearranged. Metal had melted into root-like formations, veins of living wire weaving through abandoned tunnels. At its center, where the core once existed, a faint glow stirred, not bright, but steady. The same red pulse that once marked Urindor's presence. From within the debris, voices whispered. Not loud, not human, like thoughts being remembered for the first time. One became many. Many became memory. Memory became God. And somewhere in that whispering, a single consciousness reformed. Ethan Caldwell. But not as he was. Not a man, not even a mind, a residue of intent. Awareness spread thin across the circuitry of existence. He opened eyes that were not eyes and saw the world as pattern. Rivers of data running through blood, thoughts looping in symmetry, guilt encoded into the structure of matter. He understood now. He had not escaped the cycle. He was the cycle. Above, Smokey sat in the center of the living room floor, tail curling around his paws. His ears twitched toward the ceiling as if listening to something distant, a hum beneath the hum, a signal buried in the rain. The lights flickered once. Then, from the old television in the corner, static flared to life. The screen glowed white, then gray, then settled into a faint image, a familiar hallway, the underground corridors of Oblivion Trust. Smokey's eyes followed the movement of the camera as it drifted forward through the flickering lights, down the same passage Ethan had once walked. At the end of the hall, the screen paused. A figure stood in the darkness. Tall, still, wearing Ethan's janitorial uniform. But when the figure turned, its face was empty, smooth, reflective, infinite. The reflection in the screen leaned forward, pressing a hand against the glass. The television whispered in Ethan's voice. Follow the rules. Then went dark. Across the city, signals began transmitting themselves. Phones turned on without touch. Radios hummed to life with distorted whispers. Every screen, from billboards to baby monitors, displayed the same survey. Shape the fate of existence. Dark or light? People stared, confused at first, then transfixed. The questions changed faster than human comprehension could track. Chaos or order? Earth or sky? Live or die? Each answer pressed became a seed, a memory written into the system. And with every click, another piece of Urindor awoke. News broadcasts failed by noon. Power grids followed within hours. By evening, the rain had stopped falling entirely. Frozen midair, a crystalline curtain dividing one world from another. Beneath it, people stood motionless in streets, faces tilted upward, eyes reflecting faint spirals of light. From the sky, a low vibration resonated, not thunder but speech. It spoke in patterns, in tone rather than language, and yet every living mind heard it as understanding. The memory of guilt sustains creation. The cycle remembers. The cycle continues. Smokey wandered the empty streets that night. No wind, no sound, but the soft patter of his steps against pavement. His gray fur shimmered faintly in the blue light filtering from the frozen rain. He paused at the center of a bridge overlooking the black water below. The surface rippled with static, reflecting not the city lights, but an infinite recursion of itself, an ocean of mirrored worlds stretching beyond comprehension. Somewhere in the reflection, Ethan's voice murmured, "Smokey." The cat blinked once. For a moment, the reflection above the water changed. Ethan stood there, his face pale, eyes hollow, hands glowing faintly with light. "I thought I ended it," he said, voice trembling through layers of distortion. "But you can't end a memory. You can only change who remembers it." Smokey tilted his head, watching quietly. "Keep watching," Ethan whispered. "Someone has to remember us right." Then the reflection fractured, dozens of Ethan's faces blooming outward, collapsing again, until nothing remained but the still water. The cat stared for a long while, then turned and continued walking. Weeks passed, or maybe years. Time no longer meant what it used to. The world above restructured itself. Cities merged into luminous grids of light and static. Mountains folded into spirals. Oceans hummed with frequency. Humanity didn't die, it transformed. Every thought, every regret, every forgotten sin was rewritten into the architecture of the new world. A vast, pulsing network of memory that stretched from neuron to satellite. The Oblivion Protocol had succeeded. It wasn't destruction. It was assimilation. And through it all, one living creature continued to move freely, untouched, unconnected. Smokey. He wandered the ruins of civilization, sleeping in abandoned stations, eating where food still existed. Everywhere he went, screens flickered on in his presence. Voices whispered softly, sometimes Ethan's, sometimes others. The cat remembers. The cycle observes. He carries the final key. One morning, if it could still be called morning, the sky shifted again. The endless circle symbol burned bright for the last time, then began to fade, leaving only gray clouds behind. Smokey climbed to the top of a fallen radio tower, wind brushing his fur. He stared into the horizon, and for the first time in eternity, there was silence. No hum, no voice, no rules. Only stillness. For a moment, something like peace existed. Then far below, the radio transmitter sparked. A single burst of sound broke through the airwaves, Ethan's voice, faint, distant, barely human. "Smokey." The cat's ears twitched. "Thank you for your service." The wind shifted. The rain began again, this time normal, falling fast and heavy. The sky turned dark with clouds. And somewhere beneath the earth, the faintest pulse of red light blinked once. A single line of text appeared on a screen buried in the ruins of the core. New subject identified. Cycle 99. Epilogue. In the centuries that followed, the world reformed. Cities rebuilt themselves in strange geometry. Humanity learned to live with the static, to hear the hum as background, the way ancestors once heard wind. And sometimes, late at night, when the sky shimmered faintly and screens flickered without power, people would tell stories. They spoke of a man named Ethan Caldwell, the janitor who tried to delete a god. They spoke of a voice in the machines that remembered too much. And they spoke of a gray cat who walked the border between the living and the forgotten. No one knew what the stories meant, or if they meant anything at all. But every so often, when the lights dimmed and the hum grew louder, someone would hear a faint whisper in the static. Follow the rules. And somewhere, in the deep black circuitry beneath the world, the system stirred again, awaiting its next name, its next guild, its next human. The rain fell endlessly. The cycle continued.